The AEW debut has become a thing in wrestling, aided in no small part by WWE's new favourite hobby of firing beloved star out of their company with a goddamn trebuchet. It's like what the TNA debut used to be, except with more fans, money and excitement. What's Muddy Burfy doing in the Khan zone? That sort of thing. There have been some really fun AEW debuts, Ruby Soho and Lio Rush making an impact in Casino Battle Royals. You could argue that Christians wasn't quite the blow the roof off the joint affair they'd anticipated, ditto Jake Hager. And then there's these, the cream of the crop, the top tier of oh hooray it's them, I like them, it's nice to see them again. I'm a poet and I'm very much aware of that fact. I'm Adam, hailing from PartsFUNknown, and here are the 10 best AEW debuts ranked. Would you like to debut on PartsFUNknown? Then all you have to do is like and subscribe. There, you've just made your PFK debut, and the crowd goes wild. Number 10, Santana and Ortiz. The closest thing this list has to a deep cut, with all the oh look it's thems happening recently. It's easy to forget about the former LAX standout Santana and Ortiz making the jump from Impact to Big Tony's bros and homies. Dateline All Out 2019, which feels like a million years ago at this point, after the redonkulous ladder match between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, the men who'd go on to be proud and powerful attacked both teams whilst dressed up in rubber president's masks for unmasking to a huge pop. What with Santana and Ortiz being part of the Inner Circle's formation on the very first Dynamite, it's easy to think that they were in AEW from day one. Not so. They were one of the first big jumps and an instrumental part in establishing AEW as having the most exciting tag division in wrestling today. Viva los Puerto Ricanos, he said incredibly whitely. I'm sorry about that. Number 9, FTR. And speaking of the very best tag teams on this planet, the men formerly known as The Revival, now known as FTR, finally arrived in their version of the Promised Land on the 27th of May 2020. After a match between Matt Hardy and the Young Bucks versus Private Party and Joey Janela, Butcher and Blade, cosplaying as Val Venus during his Right to Censor days, attacked, putting the boots to the Young Bucks shortly thereafter, driving down to the ring in a black Chevy truck like proper modern white hats. FTR, which stands for Fear the Revolt or Fear the Revelation or the Revival, depending on who you ask, made the save, completing their long-running Brainbusters cosplay by hitting a spike pile driver before standing chest to chest with the Bucks, their long-established internet rival, setting dream match anticipations to overdrive. While their eventual feud with the Bucks would not be AEW's finest booking hour, this was a shrewdly plotted moment, delivering a team whose gimmick had always been "we love tag team wrestling" to a company that actually felt the same way and looked down the camera lens saying, yeah, we're gonna do Bucks versus FTR, get excited. The only downside is that this moment didn't happen in front of an actual proper crowd, because could you bloody imagine? Number 8, Kenta, a debut that's notable more for what it represented for the future rather than the actual moment itself, although the moment itself was pretty damn great. Making a debut that sets the internet wrestling community on fire in the middle of a pandemic is a pretty big ask, but damn it, Kenta in all capital letters found a way. Fans had been craving a working relationship between AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling since the launch of Mr. Kana's Tussle Cabana. After 2 years of waiting patiently, or as patiently as wrestling fans can get, which is not patient at all, Kenta kicked in the described Forbidden Door, invaded AEW Beach Break in February this year, with hair only slightly more purple than mine when I first joined Wrestle Talk. Purple shampoo for the win, Big Ken. He hit John Moxley with the go to sleep, to much marking out. Moxley was the IWGP US champion at the time, a title had not received much or if any hype on AEW programming, and suddenly it was all the commentators could talk about, establishing the New Japan AEW working relationship and sparking fans to wonder who else was going to cross the Pacific to mix it up in an AEW ring. Since then, Minoru Suzuki made a pretty wonderful AEW debut at this year's All Out, and Hiroshi Tanahashi when, please? Please, Hiroshi Tanahashi, when? Number 7, Sting. And speaking of Forbidden Doors, if we had to rank the most important individual episodes of Dynamite, and hey, that's not a bad idea, nestled pretty securely in the top 3 would have to be 2020's Winter is Coming, the show that saw Kenny Omega finally become crowned AEW champion, finally turned heel, and AEW establishing another working relationship, this time with Impact, following Don Callis' shocking defection. Coming perilously close to getting lost in the shuffle, but not quite, was the AEW debut of the man called Sting. Team Taz were in the ring putting the boots to the Jacksonville Blondes, Cody Rhodes and Darby Allin, when suddenly the lights went out, snow began to fall, and holy shit, out came the icon as Tony Schiavone nearly screamed himself into a fine mist. The Stinger strode out looking like he was in bad need of an anti-dandruff shampoo, appearing on TNT for the first time in 18 years, baseball bat in hand, standing face to face with his sullen teenage boy, establishing the duo that still stands proud today. After his WWE career ended in the worst possible way, fans were overjoyed that Sting's final run was taking place where it belonged, in direct competition with the company he's always been in direct competition with. Hooray. Number 6, Brody Lee and Matt Hardy. It's only right to group these two debuts together as they both happened on the same episode of Dynamite. And while it might not be the best double debut in AEW's history, don't you worry, we'll get to that, you impatient little sods. It was the company's first double debut, and boy howdy did it make headline news. The show itself took place March 18th, 2020, and it was already a pretty noteworthy show. The first no-fan show of what would come to be a 17-month stretch of pandemic wrestling shows. But more than WWE's spooky empty chair SmackDown, AEW found a way to still make it appointment telly. After months of teasing the debut of the Exalted One, the man who'd become leader of the Dark Order and who everyone thought would be Spooky Matt Spooky Hardy, Brody Lee was the swerve choice, debuting before the main event of the show with a spooky video package and a teleportation trick he borrowed from a good friend. He then almost decapitated Christopher Daniels with a big boot, followed by his famous discus lariat. That's big news then. But Special K's pummeling place wasn't done. After the main event of the night, Inner Circle versus Elite, a drone would descend to the ring, Vanguard 1 heralding the arrival of broken Matt Hardy to end on a whopper of a cliffhanger. If only it had been 1 week earlier. But hey, in this and many other ways, life is unfair. But even so, what a statement moment in the history of Dynamite. Number 5, Malachi Black. Whoopsie, this is why you stay on top of your paperwork, I guess. The top 5 entries on this list all took place in front of live crowds because, I mean, come on, of course they did. A debut without fans in attendance is a bit like a burger without sauce. It's fine, but come on. One of the most surprising entries on the list came courtesy not just of Mr. T's Slamboree picking up a hot free agent, but also because of WWE beefing Aleister Black's contract when promoting him to the main roster. See, following a standard WWE release, fans are conditioned to wait the standard 90 days for wrestlers' standard no-compete clauses to expire. After just 30 days at AEW Road Rager in July, Malachi Black debuted, blowing wrestling fans' tiny minds and also Cody and Arn's minds with his big fucking shoe. You're lucky Arn wasn't packing his Glock though, Malachi. You're lucky. See, WWE had forgotten to update Aleister Black's 30-day no-compete clause, the standard for NXT wrestlers, to the 90-day clause, standard for those on the main roster, allowing for one of the rarest things in modern-day professional wrestling, an actual surprise. It is a very addictive pop to go back and rewatch. Number 4, Dustin Rhodes. I thought about just putting Double or Nothing as a concept on this list like a cheeky maverick, but the world isn't ready for such trend-setting list making, but your kids are gonna love it. Sure, the very first Double or Nothing on May 25th, 2019 was pretty much everyone in AEW's technical debut because it was a debut of the entire company, if you want to get pedantic about it. And of course you do, you horrible little gremlins. But I don't care. This was the night that Dustin Rhodes debuted for AEW to face off against his brother, and it was bloody wonderful and wonderfully bloody. The match itself received Big Dave Sweaty Meltzer's full fat 5 stars, which is not bad for your company's first show, and it was the best thing on the card, a proper bit of Southern Gothic heartstrings and headlocks wrestling that showed that AEW wouldn't just be about quick lads doing super kicks, but also have plenty of emotional heft to it. And it cannot be underestimated just how perfectly Dustin Rhodes worked this match. It's a long-running gag that Dustin's wrestling career has been aging like Benjamin Button, and this is probably going to be the veteran's masterpiece, embracing his brother to a huge ovation after a 20-minute war that's still a presence in the conversation of AEW's best ever matches. And it still wasn't quite Double or Nothing's biggest surprise. That would be number 3, Jon Moxley. There are better AEW debuts, but you could argue that this was one of the most important. The big finish, their first ever pay-per-view, the moment tasked with being the big hook to bring fans back for future shows, was Kenny Omega being blindsided by the man formerly known as Dean Ambrose, who had publicly and not at all amicably parted ways with the biggest company in the world. Jon Moxley showed up with a light in his eyes that fans hadn't seen in a long time, a shocking defection that cemented the statement that AEW was set on being the alternative to WWE. While that tribalism is a little played out today, and honestly a little bit toxic, for the first major show of this new major company, it was exactly the kind of shot across the bow, buzz-generating you that fans desperate for a bit more indie in their Major League Wrestling could truly sink their teeth into. Moxley strutted to the ring through the crowd like he used to do in the glory days of the Shield. The pop was insane and just grew and grew before decking Jericho and savaging Omega, ending with a paradigm shift on the stack of poker chips, a proper iconic moment. Number 2, the Bay Bay Goats. This is the noise that Ollie Davis made when Bryan Danielson debuted. And please can someone make a remix of that? I've decided that I need that in my life. Like Brody Lee and Matt Hardy did the double a million years ago at All Out 2021, a strong contender for AEW's best show to date. Show's main event, a stonker of a surprise considering that A, most people were expecting Bryan Danielson, and B, the lad was on NXT television less than a month earlier. In a lovely surprise, instead of turning on his elite friends, which would be absolutely fair by the way, in case anyone forgot what happened to Adam Cole Baby to end his Bullet Club tenure, he made amends with the group with strong BTE energy. Responded the audience at home. I mean, that kind of makes sense with the character, but it's not all that dramatic a cliffhanger, and that's when Ride of the Valkyries hit. Over to Ollie again. A sensational 1-2 punch of top star acquisitions. Genuinely the kind of hands on the side of your head moment that makes you feel, oh, now something is happening. Now it is on. Before All Out, it felt like it could be an actual debate as to which single company has the best roster of workers in the world. After these debuts, that argument feels just a little less balanced. And number 1, CM Punk, because it made Ollie cry. It made a lot of people cry. It made a lot of people very, very happy indeed. And hey, look, is the CM Punk babyface train gonna run out of steam at some point? Yes, almost definitely, and maybe some point soon. But you simply can't deny that in a year that saw wrestling fans return, Sasha versus Bianca at Mania, Edge and Christian hugging, Punk's debut on Rampage The First Dance was the biggest swell of emotion that wrestling fans have felt all year. A moment 7 years in the making and beautiful in its simplicity. CM Punk likes wrestling again. Can you believe it? It was a moment of understanding between promotion and fan, of AEW, at least on this night, in this single instance, understanding exactly what fans wanted, needed, what CM Punk wanted, needed, and they delivered it. Sometimes the perfect wrestling moment just requires you to get out of that moment's way and not complicate it. A lesson that WWE and hell, even AEW don't always understand, but at the First Dance they did. They really did. And that's our list. What's your favorite AEW debut? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and share this video around if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to PartsFUNknown for more silly wrestling content. Jam that jam.